Really excited to be starting our first session. My name's Pete Howard. I'm with the Centre for Entrepreneurship at the University of Canterbury, and we're going to be kicking things off with a really exciting panel discussion featuring some amazing expat innovators. And that's going to be hosted by Toni Truslove, the global CEO of KEA. So really excited for that session. Please feel free to check out the other sessions that are going to be happening across the other 3 rooms, which you can find on the online program and the links there. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Toni Truslove to get us started with our very first session for the day. Welcome, Toni.
Kia ora, Pete. Morena tātou. Look, totally delighted to be bringing a KEA community session to this wonderful group this morning. KEA, for those who maybe haven't come across us, we are an organisation that's been operating for 20 years now, and we exist to connect and engage global Kiwi. So we run a range of community and business connection services, and really we help Kiwi to maximise global connection for their business and personal success. So quite actually, the theme of our discussion this morning is the power of a global community. And I am delighted to have 3 of our KEA community, real powerhouse global connectors, joining me this morning, and I can't wait for you to meet them. So I'll do a quick introduction of each, but then I'm going to hand straight over to them and get them talking. So joining us this morning, I have the lovely Sam Witters. So Sam is a global Kiwi and a long-term member of KEA's world-class New Zealand network. Throughout her time offshore and also since her return to New Zealand, Sam has utilised connection and collaboration to drive business outcomes. We've also got Kaila Colbin. So Kaila was KEA's Friend of New Zealand award winner last year. She was recognised for her extensive work connecting Aotearoa, particular Ōtautahi, to the world. Kaila is the CEO and founder of Boma, an international leadership practice, and has led numerous change-making events here in New Zealand. So welcome, Kaila. And finally, Jo Harawira. Jo is one of the 2 founders of Wai Mānuka. For those of you that haven't yet tried delicious Wai Mānuka, please try and pick one up. It is a successful and uniquely New Zealand beverage. And Jo and his team are currently undertaking an export journey. And KEA Connect, our business connection service, has been able to help and support Jo to gain more global connection as he starts this journey. So welcome, Jo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to each of the panel now and just ask them to talk a little bit more about themselves, their connection to KEA, and also we're going to kick off by asking them to share their highest value connection story. So Kaila, I'm going to start with you.
Excellent. Kia ora, Toni. Kia ora tātou. Hi, everybody. So good to see you here. I was reflecting on this highest value connection story because connections and networks is something that is so core to everything I do. But really the story that I want to share is a story from high school. So I grew up in New York City. I went to a high school called Riverdale. And I, like many people, had a hard time in high school. I had a pretty terrible self-image. I struggled to, fit in. I struggled to feel confident in myself. And when I left high school, I didn't go back. And I don't know if I talked to anyone from high school for 20 years. And then 20 years after I left, I went to my high school reunion. And I will say, if you are at all like me and had any kind of challenging time in high school, 20 years is a good gap to give it, because what ended up happening was it was sufficient time for me to kind of grow into myself without the idea of I should be doing what this other person is doing, or I should be achieving how much this other person is achieving. I went back for my 20-year reunion and I was like, you people are awesome. Like, I was so blown away. I still had this kind of mental picture of all of us gossiping in the cafeteria. And instead I found that these are, actual human beings with full, rich lives and interesting stories. And it was such a delight. And today some of my closest friends are people that I went to high school with, not because we've stayed in touch that entire time, but because we had that gap and we're able to kind of grow into ourselves and then reunite as sort of fully fledged adults. So that to me was a really powerful connection story that I wanted to share. Good to see you. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Kaila. Joe, we'll come to you.
Kia ora Toni, ko Joe Harawira taku ingoa, ko Ngāti Awa, ko Ngā Tarangi Ngā Iwi, no Whakatane Ahau. Kia ora koutou, my name is Joe Harawira and I'm the co-founder and managing director at Wai Mānuka. When I was thinking about this question, what came to mind was the power of whanaungatanga and enduring connections. And if I think back to 2011, I'm going to talk about our relationship with KEA, is that's when it all started for us. So I was completing my MBA and part of the study was an international study tour of North America. And I got to meet other Kiwi business people in San Francisco. And one of the things that they spoke about was this epic organization of Kiwis doing amazing things that have committed to helping other Kiwis with global aspirations. And so this is 2011. And since then, that's always kind of stuck in my mind. And then fast forward to today, where through Wai Mānuka, we have such an amazing relationship with KEA that's seen our beverage served at the KEA World Class Awards, through to gathering market insights, connections overseas, because we're doing a capital raise, and all these amazing things that really support sort of our export ambitions. And so for me, it really speaks to the power, I guess, of whanaungatanga and those enduring connections over time, because that was 2011, so 12, 13 years ago from when we first connected with KEA through to having such a strong relationship and a better understanding of the market and global connection. So yeah, I just really wanted to acknowledge that. So thank you.
Kia ora, Joe. Sam.
Thanks, Toni. Marina Tato. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you, Stephen. He mihi nui tēnei no te Tarawhiti. Just a big shout out from Tarawhiti Gisborne. We have to keep it in the news at the moment. I'm sitting here in Otahi. If someone had said to me 5 years ago when I was on my favorite East Coast of the US, New York City, that Sam, you'd be sitting in Gisborne, Tarawhiti with an Indigenous production and technology studio, helping rangatahi into digital production and animation. And then that would find you in Christchurch as a director of the Digital Screen Campus for the University of Canterbury. I would have scoffed and laughed out loud. I have to say it has been the most outstanding 4 years of my life. And the reason why it's been so successful for me personally has been because of this whānau, this extended community that particularly KEA has provided. The hardest thing for me was coming back to New Zealand, coming back to Aotearoa from the US. I've lived most of my working life outside of New Zealand. I have 5 boys and 2 dogs, all boys, and a granddaughter, which I'm lucky to have. So to have come back here, it was quite difficult to acclimatise, to figure out what it all meant. So we gathered up the skills that I had, and we set up in Tarawhiti, we set up Toru Studios and Umble Studios, training rangatahi in animation and digital production. They've gone on to work in the most outstanding media and entertainment companies creating content. So I now find myself at the University of Canterbury with the Digital Screen Campus, really in the convergence of storytelling and technology. When I look at things like global community and what does it mean, it's so important. When you look at a balance sheet of a company, if we could put a value on networking, we should definitely do it there. I call it reciprocity, the currency of reciprocity. It's about giving and receiving, and I can only do what I have done because of this fantastic community of people around me. Thank you.
Kia ora, Sam. Thanks everyone for your amazing connection stories. I couldn't agree more with the wonderful power of connection, and also just the general generosity of Kiwi around the world. I think it is something so unique to us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, that we are actually willing to take a call, no matter where we are in the world. It is absolutely one of our superpowers. I'm going to pose another question to our panel. So look, you are all phenomenal global operators. And what I'm really interested to know is how have you each grown your global community? So no doubt there are participants on the call this morning that are thinking, gosh, global community, connection, yep, that is absolutely what me or my business needs. But how do I go about starting that? How do I start to think about that? So I'm going to come back to each of you now and just ask for your insights on how you have personally grown your community over time. Joe, we'll come to you.
Thanks, Toni. We're a small nation and we're far away from most of the world, so we have no choice but to grow our networks if one of our goals is to build a global brand. So for me, that sort of means getting out there and meeting as many people as I can, sort of attending events and workshops and seminars, and joining groups and organisations, like becoming a member of KEA or a customer of New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. But the thing to bear in mind is that all of this needs to be done with strategic intent. So you need to understand sort of, what's the purpose of this connection? Are there mutual benefits? Does it bring me closer to my goal? And what's the opportunity cost? And if you can keep those things in mind as you're going through this process, then that really helps kind of build the community that you need. So kia ora.
Yeah, nice. Kaila.
Yeah, so a couple of things I want to say. One is, at the risk of this whole session sounding like a total infomercial for KEA, I just want to say how remarkable it is, especially as an American. It's kind of astonishing that we have this organization where the entire purpose is you call them and you say, I'd like to meet this other person. And they call them and they say, are you willing to take a call from such and such? And they go, sure, no problem. And that's all they do. It's amazing. It's amazing. Like the fact that this organization exists and that it was conceived of and then backed is astonishing to me. And we need to take advantage of it where we can. I'm gonna add on to Joe's perspective on the strategic intent. I know right now in my business, I'm very, very focused on what I'm trying to accomplish. And so I have to be extremely strategic with my time. What I will also say is I turned 50 this year. I spent 40 years basically building networks and forging connections with zero strategic intent, and basically just going, where can I be useful? And, Jonathan should really meet Jules, and I'm going to connect you to because I think you have something to talk about, which is kind of the premise behind KEA. And so I guess the addition that I would offer is that sometimes all we're doing is putting marbles in the marble jar or putting, that like reciprocity in the bank without necessarily any clear insight into what we might get out of those connections or that opportunity. And there's value in both. That's my whakaro.
Amazing. Sam, your thoughts?
Gosh, it's incredible, isn't it? Having spent 7 years in the US and then 14 in Europe and in the UK, networking in the US really made me see it's considered perceived as a currency. It's a currency of moving forward, of strategic intent, of getting yourself forward as you go up in case you come down. And so you hop on a train, everyone talks, and everyone's passing business cards and swapping numbers. It's the least quiet place I've ever been in. And the value of that has been incredible. It's held me in really, really good stead coming back into New Zealand. And the one thing I would say is I just keep the door open and play it forward and make sure, and I totally agree, in this time poor environment we find ourselves in between switching and filtering social media and demands on our time, really important just to keep that door open. So I'm always open to anybody who comes to me, but making sure that we're not time wasting at the same time, so that there is clear intent behind the ask.
Yeah, and that's a great segue because we are increasingly time poor, and it can be hard making time to network. There are a lot of demands, there's a lot happening, and I definitely take the point that you want to meet as many people and pop as many marbles in the jar as possible, because you just don't know when they're going to be helpful or when you are going to be able to help them as well. But I wondered, is there a way that you can recognize or identify high value connections amongst all of the various networking opportunities and introductions that you might get. Kaila, Sam, or Joe, did any of you want to speak to that point?
Yeah, I struggle with this question. I got to be honest. And the reason I struggle with this question is because I do carry, and it's not because I haven't had high value connections. I so much have. You're one of them. You know, like there's so many people. Stephen's one of them. So many people who have been provided such massive support to me. I struggle with it because I feel like as soon as I approach the connection with what can I get from it, I've lost something vital and important. And so the high value connection is more like, what joy can we gather together? What can we accomplish together? How can we support each other? There's something in there that for me is really critical, and that I feel, you know, as an American who's part of this networking as currency like culture, there's a piece of it that can feel gross to me, of like, I can scratch your back and you can scratch mine, as opposed to we're just all imperfect meat sacks stumbling through life, and the more that we can uplift each other and put our arms around each other and, you know, just like let ourselves be our highest selves, then the better off we're all going to be.
It's such a wonderful point. Networking, gathering connections without intent. Amazing. Joe or Sam, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, sure. I would say, like, in addition to bringing us closer towards our vision, for us, it's really about the alignment of values. So, for example, caring for people and planet, trust and sort of authenticity are ones that come to mind. And if people are willing to give time, energy, and presence to an engagement, then that needs to be reciprocated for there to be any high value connection sort of moving forward. But yeah, that's just my take on it. So kia ora.
I think that's really interesting, Joe. And I think also that if you look at anybody, you just have to look at both their past and their forward, who is around them. We attract energy and like-minded people. And, you know, it's fair to say people have worked for me that I have worked for are still in my circle. And I really value that. And it's not about business at the end of the day. It's about what do you bring? And Kaila, you're right, the joy of it, and ensuring that that's fed and watered properly. So, you know, I think we all do that, and thanks to Toni, she provides a really lovely foray for us to grow in.
Amazing. So look, we've touched on this a little bit already, but did you have any further advice around how you can cultivate connections? Particularly, you know, you've all spoken about building connections over time. So these relationships, they're not short-term sort of one-off connection points. These are lasting relationships. Did you have any advice to the group around how you can really cultivate those long-term connections? Kaila, shall we come to you?
Sure. I'm gonna share something that I'm not particularly good at, but I have friends who are really good at, and when I see it, it's beautiful, which is reach out. And it doesn't need to be often, and it doesn't need to be like massive, but just like the occasional kind of ping. And for me, I will say my best relationships are relationships where there's no kind of pressure of like, if I haven't heard from you in 3 weeks, then you're in trouble because you're not spending enough time with me. I can't do that because I got too much going on. But like the people who are like, just want you to know I'm thinking about you, or hey, just want to give you a heads up, here's what's been happening for me over the past 6 months or whatever, that kind of steady like presence where I go, oh, awesome, I'm so glad to hear from that person, and I'm so glad they're doing well.
Cool. Sam, did you have anything to add?
No, I think exactly that. Listen, it's just be seen. If we don't know you're there, if you don't reach out for the help, we don't know. And be present and be passionate about what you do, and that seems to attract like-minded energy.
Amazing advice. Joe?
Yeah, I would just add that by accepting that the success of your business will largely come down to the quality of your relationships over the long term. So when you put people first, the rest of it becomes like a formality or a process. And, you know, it circles right back to that whanaungatanga piece or relationships and the connections you create over the long term. So, yeah, kia ora.
Wonderful. Such amazing advice. I thought I'd just recap some of what we've heard so far. But while I'm doing that, please, anyone in the audience who would like to submit some questions, have a think about those, and you can either pop them in the comments box or pop your hand up and I'll get to you in just a moment. But look, some amazing things that have really sort of stood out for me from the discussion is, you know, Kaila's advice to just put marbles in the jar. Build long-term connections, and also building connection without intent. So really focusing on the joy of connection without any pressure. And also reach out, be seen, be present, and attract like-minded people with similar energies. That really stood out for me. And Jo, I really loved your point on the success of business being about the quality of your relationships. And that comes down to people. So I think some wonderful guidance there. Did anyone, we've got a question. Thank you, Janet. So the question is, what was the hardest connection you made that paid off, and how did you make it? Kaila, Jo, or Sam, just maybe pop your hand up if you'd like to provide an answer to that one.
It's a hard question, Janet. I really appreciate it. I'll tell you a story about my relationship with KEA, which like I say, such a powerful relationship. So I get this call from KEA, and they're like, so you've won this award, or you're up to win this award, and it's kind of a big deal, and James Cameron won it last year, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, who are these? Who is this? What? I've done what? How? And I'm like, so I said, did I win the award? And they're like, well, first we have to ask if you're willing to accept it. And then if you accept it, yes, you've won it. And you have to come to Auckland and be at this thing. And I'm like, I cannot believe it. So I was with a colleague of mine. We were in the middle of a meeting, and I hang up and I'm like freaking out. Like, I just won this award. And James Cameron won it last year. And I don't even know how do you get from James Cameron to Kaila Colbin? I don't even know how this works. Like, I'm totally freaking out. And then I talked to my other colleague, and I'm like, I just won this award. And she goes, oh yeah, the one we nominated you for last November. And here's what happened, Toni, I don't think you know this, but here's what happened. Not only did my team write the award nomination, they gave it to me, and I was like, oh no, that's not good enough. And I rewrote the whole thing, and then got a friend of mine to submit the nomination, like, on my behalf, and then completely put all of that out of my mind. So that by the time you called, I was like, what? How did that happen? So I guess the thing that I'm saying here is the hardest connection I made, like, that was a hard connection to make, and it was absolutely worth it. Like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there is the bottom line from that story.
Yeah, we're not super amazing at it as Kiwi, are we? But we absolutely need to be better at it. And for anyone who doesn't know Kaila's story, I please encourage you to jump onto the KEA YouTube channel. There is a wonderful video story of all of Kaila's amazing work. And I think if you have the chance to watch it, you will agree with me that she was wonderfully deserving of that award. Thank you, Kaila. We've got some lovely comments. Amanda really loved the joy of connection. I totally agree. That's such a standout point for me. She wondered if anyone had any thoughts on partnerships versus collaborations.
I think that's a really interesting question, and it's defining in terms of intent as well. It's all very well to collect around you people that are going to help scaffold you. But when it comes to business, what is actually going to help scaffold you? And you have to be very clear about your own business plan and what you're trying to do. And all the joy in the world doesn't mean that that's going to be a successful business, right? A number of things can happen along the way that we stumble and graze our knees and have to get back up again. So the one thing I would say is that you have to get back up again and then look for help. And help is normally absolutely available to do that. And I think it's quite difficult to define, the difference between business and the requirement for business, and the person you are, for example, myself, I'm a highly functioning introvert. I know, Toni, you'll laugh at that. But it's true, and it's quite hard to say, right, well, I'm the front person here, I have to be this person, and in order to be this person is the thing that unlocks something else for the next person. So, you know, really just take yourself and your ego out of the equation sometimes, and do understand what it is you need for business and what it is you need for yourself in terms of sustenance and being able to run that business.
Absolutely, great advice. Brian's also made a comment that, you know, or a question, would the most valuable connect be the next one? And I think that's such a wonderful perspective, and it really goes out to the advice that our panelists have already given, which is to reach out, to be seen. If people don't know that you need help, they're not going to be able to help you. So I think that would be a resounding yes from us all, Brian. And then just one final question from Kirsty. She said, are there any online resources or market insights available via KEA about Gen Z attitudes internationally? So this is definitely a question for me. Thank you. Gen Z attitudes. I might take that one offline, Kirsty, and come back to you if that's okay. We may have something that can help you. I'm not sure if we target as narrowly to that age group, but that's wonderful. Before I close, are there any other questions from anyone for our wonderful panelists this morning? No? Wonderful. Thank you, Val, who's just said that the vibe of the people has prompted me to just join KEA now. That's absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much to Kaila, Joe, and Sam. It's been wonderful to hear your perspectives. I very much hope that you've been able to take a bit of inspiration from their stories and from their wonderful points. And I just warmly encourage you all to keep up the networking, to build connections that spark joy for you and for others, to find people with like-minded energies, and to enjoy what you're doing. And from Kaila, Joe, and Sam, we all wish you all the best. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Toni. Thank you so much for hosting such an amazing session. And I can't think of a better session to start off with, but a subject based around connecting and networks. And what a fantastic group of people we have just joining us here with the Seeds Impact Conference today. So thank you to Kaila, to Sam and Joe for sharing your wisdom and insights, and to you, Toni, for hosting that. Now,